What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another meta update builds video. And today we have 11.7. Last one I did was 11.5. There's been a lot of changes, even from 11.6. A lot of quote-unquote new items have been introduced. Other old items that come back into the meta, like shifters, Evolve, Hasten Fatalis being one of them. Old items that are being reintroduced, and I imagine there's more to come. But yeah, so there's been a lot of changes from 11.6, so I thought there's even some builds from then that I can obviously update, like the Mage Build, for example. But every single build for the most part has changed with a couple of items, and I thought it's a good time to do that. So 11.7, if you're new to these videos, I do make these updates whenever I feel like there's been a decent amount of changes in the items to make every single class kind of change in the builds. It's better than doing like a once over builds for every single god, because every single patch there's new things introduced. So I like to make these videos just to show you what some of the changes are and some of the items for each class. We're going to go over every single class. And I think that's it. You can look at my old videos to see what the meta was like beforehand too, if you want to, because as I said, I'm not going to go over everything, but I'm just going to go over what in my opinion, are good right now and what's in the meta and what you'll be seeing from like higher end play as the best builds, in my opinion. So with that being said, let me make sure that my mic is working. Nice. Yeah, let's go into this. So let's just get right into it. We'll always start with the hunters. So let's start with the hunters. And actually I can go ahead, go into here. I like to have this text up here as well. AA hunters. All right. So as I said, every single class has gotten a lot of changes. I do have my notes right here, just so in case you see me looking down, just to make sure that I cover everything. I want to make sure that I don't miss any of the things that I want to say, because there is a lot to unpack for every single class, as you may be aware. So hunters, there have been a decent amount of changes to hunters in general. A lot of the recent changes have made the ability-based hunters a lot better than your hunters. Your ability-based warriors are generally better than your auto attack hunters. AA stands for auto attack. And actually, can you see my cursor? There we go. So a lot of the AA hunters just weren't doing all that great until this patch, and it was specifically 11.6. Gods like Medusa and like Danza, and even other gods like Scotty have like been popping up in the meta just because of the ability based is just better, just because of the amount of burst that they have. Mages were a lot better, assassins were a lot better because of that burst. It turns out when you reduce all the protections and health, it does make burst a little bit better. But yeah, this is, if you just want to take a picture of this, I'm gonna make sure to move my camera now that I see that's in the way a little bit. That works. Give me one sec. Okay, we're good. Anyways, as I was saying, if you just want to take a screenshot of this, this is like your go-to build. These are some of your oops, you can't see my cursor. These are your alternate items that you can interchange in here. Obviously you don't get the explanation, but you can just take a picture of this, screenshot this after the explanation, whatever, if you just want to build for AA hunters. Let's go into it. So starting with the starter, nothing's really changed for that. You still can go into your other starter, which is Death's Toll, into Death's Temper, generally speaking. I just think Leader's Cow, Leather's Cow into Leader's Cow is just better, just because of its passive, making it to where whenever you're near allied gods, which you're always near, as I always say, in Joust, it's just going to be better, getting that extra increased power, yada yada yada, especially in its base starter as well. So nothing really changes with the starter, in my opinion. This is just your go-to every time. And then as for Aussie, so Aussie got a recent change. I think it was 11.6. 11.6, Aussie got some pen. It actually is technically a revert for people who don't know about old Aussie. Aussie did just have flat pen on it beforehand, and then they got rid of it because it was just so good, and then they nerfed it again or whatever, and then nobody built it. Then they're buffing it, and then they buffed it again a while back, and then now they're buffing it even more with some pen. I mean, it gives you 4 stats. for the low price of 2,400. It's just the go-to item in my opinion, and this was the go-to item for hunters way last season, and it didn't even have pen. Pen is disgusting. Like, giving something pen is like huge. It's crazy how much pen can just boost an item up. Beforehand, you would go Aussie later in the build, so Aussie was still a very good item, but I mean, you get 40 power, lifesteal, flat pen, 20% attack speed, and you get even more lifesteal in your passive when you get below 60%, obviously. So that's like almost always your go-to into Aussie. It used to be dominance, and you can still go like, you know, dominance rush, but with how much pen is important, especially in this meta, because flat pen is a lot better due to everyone having reduction in prots. It just makes Aussie that much better. So I'm always building Aussie straight up here. It's just a really, really good item right now. After this, I still think dominance, nothing's really changed with dominance. Dominance obviously was your go-to. Gods like X-Ball, for example, who use a lot of mana, you might want to think about switching these two. That's generally speaking maybe an exception. You can go dominance into Aussie. I still suggest going Aussie into dominance just because how much of Aussie gives you early game. But still, dominance second item is generally speaking just your go-to. With the changes to the map, I'm assuming a lot of you saw my update on the map changes. And I was sort of explaining what Hi-Rez was doing, their thought process behind what they were doing to the Joust scene, you know, trying to make it to a double tank. Team comp isn't as good. Back or tanking towers isn't as good. Well, it turns out, as of right now, that really hasn't changed. Your tanks are still very good. Technically, overall, the tower got nerfed because it lost 200 health. Outside of all the other buffs that it got, it's still, you still destroy it, and the amount of extra prot reduction just doesn't have that much effect. I played a little bit, and it really doesn't do that much more, or at least doesn't feel like that. And so you can still tank towers, which means a double tank is still very good right now. So dominance, giving you that extra 20% physical penetration, and your autos is very good. So, you know, percent pen, items like Kins are going to be very good in the double tank right now. And then you got your Hastened Fatalis. This item obviously wasn't as good as it once was way back in the day, but still a very, 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 very good item. I like to build this right around your third item slot here. You can maybe make a case for second. I don't like first item Hastened, even though I guess you can get away with it if you really want to. And the biggest reason is because you can see here, it gives a lot of stats, but not any power, which is one of the biggest things. It does give pen, which is nice. It gives attack speed, movement speed, and a little bit of health. But really, you're buying this item for its passive because its passive is just gross. Hitting enemy guy with a basic tag grants haste for 1 second. You're basically just autoing, like, and you're hitting them. If you obviously, I'm assuming you know what Haste and Fatalis does. And so, like, I usually like to get my build online here, where you get a little bit of power, enough power to do things. You have about 2.0 attack speed. You have 137 power. Well, minus the leader's cow, you'll have a little bit less than that. You'll have your regular starter. You'll have enough to where Hasten Fatalis will actually feel nice right around this point. If you build it first, you're going to be doing no damage, which I just don't like at all. And so I think Hasten Fatalis around your third item is very good. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. I think that's basically it, yeah. Yeah. Anyways, next up, Kins. I do like going Kins here as well, and this is just because of the double tank. Team comp, gods aren't having as much health, but you see this, the threshold is at 2750. Most gods are still getting above 2750 if you're a tank. And then if the target has over 2250 health, beforehand, your squishies never got to that point really ever. Anyways, they'd get like 2000, a little bit over 2000. So, you know, the upscale in the percent of maximum health isn't that necessary, or isn't that impactful, I mean. So the damage from Kins isn't really changing all too much. A little bit, but not impactful to the point where you wouldn't want to build this, because most people are building enough health to get at least 2750 if you're going double tank. So I think Kins is still your go-to item here. Now, if you're going into a team that doesn't have any, you know, you're not going up against double tank, you're going up against squishy backline, or, you know, like a guardian assassin mage, for example, you can always go your Odysseus's bow. And honestly, you can go Odysseus's bow just in general, just because of how much damage it does. Generally speaking, oop, this is in the wrong order. But generally speaking, I do like going Odysseus's bow if, you know, going into a squishy team comp. And then obviously Kins if you're going into backline or double tank. It just really depends on what you want for that. And then last up, you would go into, generally speaking, your Titan's Bane or Executioner. One thing to keep in mind, I forgot to say this, you can get Executioner instead of Dominance here. You can skip out on Dominance and just, you know, exchange it later. So let's say you want to get Executioner first, Hasten Fatalis, Kins, and then Dominance, or Titan's Bane or something like that. You can do that. I don't recommend it because of the amount of, I mean, this gives you so much early game. And then on top of that, MP5 is very important for gods like X-Ball, as X-Ball is a very good hunter right now. So generally speaking, last item I'd go either Executioner or Titan's Bane. Obviously, Invendum Executioner if you want anti-heal, and then the other if you want to do the other glyph if you want to do more damage to tanks. And then right here, your bottom four. We already talked about Oboe, but Ichaival is another item that I think is okay. Enough to give it an honorable mention because I think this item is more of a lane-based item where like it's better in lane. As you can see, Ichaival gives you some pen, which is very good, attack speed, and some power, which is really nice. But basically, its passive is what's really important. Every successful basic attack increases your physical power by 5 and reduces your target's physical power from items by 5, and can stack up to 4. So up to 40 power for magical and 20 for physical. And I think this really just gives value when you're like dueling, for example. Like in duel, I think you almost always go Ichaival if you're a hunter. And then in Conquest, I think Ichaival is very good as, you know, you're laning basically. But in Joust, I just don't think it has that much impact. And generally speaking, you build this item first, and for Ichaival in exchange for like an Aussie or Dominance, it just doesn't feel good in my opinion. You can make it work obviously, and if you really like this item, it's very cheap. It's 2,200. You can make it work. So I do want to put it as honorable mention. Silver Branch obviously can be in exchange for last item here. X-Ball doesn't have any, you know, stims or a passive that increases attack speed. I think for gods like maybe Hachiman, Izanami, or any other guy with like a stim, I think that Silver Branch Bow would be your really good last spot. And this is just because it gives you a little bit of pen, attack speed, and it's passive that when you overcap attack speed, you get even more power. So I want to put that there just in case for your stim gods. And then obviously last up, Stormseeker. Stormseeker has physical pen as well, 20% attack speed and physical power, which is really good for 2,100 gold. And obviously its passive is very good as it gives you it's stacking attack speed buff, so you get more attack speed. However, first of all, you would build this early in the game. This would go in exchange for your Aussie, and I think this is a solid item. I think it's an okay item. Problem is, for Joust, I just don't think it has a place in it. With the recent changes to the Joust making the game even quicker, I mean, you're getting level 20 at like 13, 14 minutes into the game, which is wild to me. Some games, a lot of times it's around the 15-minute mark, whereas it used to be like around the 20-minute mark is where you get level 20. The game is just a lot faster. You're ending games sooner, you're doing more things sooner. The passive is just not really good for that. You can make it work, I guess, but at the end of the day, if you're going to build Stormseeker, I would suggest selling it at the end, as this is just an item that gives you that early game spike, and then, I mean, that's basically it. But I did want to put it down here because you can do some, you know, cheeky things with this item. Other than that, this is basically your build for your hunters. Yeah, that's basically it for your hunters. Again, I think ability-based hunters are a lot better right now. Sorry, not a lot better, a little bit better, because of the items like Hasten Fatalis, and your other options with Stormseeker and Ichaival make a little bit of a difference. And then obviously Aussie being really good right now. So I think they're a little bit better, but I still think ability-based hunters are still going to be more in the meta than it will be for your AA hunters. But this is your general build for your hunters. All right, on to your ability-based hunters. So your gods like Medusa, your gods like Scotty, Don Zaboro, Chiron, you know, all of these type of ability based hunters who are actually really good right now. If you don't know, Medusa had a nerf, and I still think she's still S tier, and that's just because, I mean, burst is just so good right now. And specifically Medusa had gotten a lot of buffs in past that sort of, you know, crept up to making her one buff away from being busted. But this is gonna be a relatively short one because nothing really has changed all that much in my opinion. You're still going Bluestone into Bluestone Brooch. I mean, there's no other starter for you really in my opinion. Maybe Boyer's Axe, but you're still not getting the damage output that Bluestone gives you. It also gives you, you know, MP5, HP5, stuff like that. You're going, still like going into Jotun's Vigor, obviously, because it gives you ability lifesteal when you get below 60% health. Transcendence obviously is your second. Transcendence I like building second because with the recent changes to stacking this year, at the beginning of this year, it makes it to where, you know, the more damage the later the game is, the easier it is to stack. So I think building this around your second item will make it sort of like your perfect spot to stack while doing damage. Fail Not obviously still very good. 20% cooldown, pen, critical, strike chance, which you can get some really high-end crits with a lot of power that you fucking have with this build. And then you still get power, and then the passive as well. Titan's Bane just to min-max your stats. I mean, you literally get 40% physical penetration on top of the 10%. I mean, you're getting 50% pen when you use an item up until this point with one item, or with one build, I'm sorry. One ability, my god. As this gives 10% physical pen, and it does stack with the passive of Titan's Bane, so you can get up to 50% off of one ability. So keep that in mind. And then Heartseeker, obviously, just because it does extra damage. I meant to also put this here as well for a god like Uller, who gets really good value out of Hydras as well. You can always put Hydras in here in exchange for Fail Not or Transcendence if you are playing a god like Uller. Otherwise, Hydras isn't great on Medusa, for example. Not bad, just not, you know, there's better items. But with this build, you actually get 60% pen off of one ability if you're proccing Titan's Bane passive, which happens every 5 seconds, so you're most likely going to be doing that. But that is your general build here. Crusher, obviously, I think is a sleeper item. You can put this in at some point in this build. You can get rid of Titan's Bane for the Crusher. I don't think it's as good, so why it's an honorable mentions here, as Titan's Bane's passive is just a better Crusher, even though Crusher has an extra bonus damage in its passive. But here, nonetheless, you can build that. Soul Eater I've been liking a lot more. Soul Eater was always good, I felt like, on gods, even like Marty, for example, or, you know, like Medusa. And I think that you would obviously build this Soul Eater here instead of Transcendence. So you get rid of Transcendence, and then you would go your regular build, you know, Fail Not, Titan's Bane, Heartseeker, and then you could do that as well. One thing, I'm putting it in honorable mention because I still don't think it's as good, because you can go into Jotun's Vigor, which is basically just basically a Soul Eater, just, you know, you have to get to 60% health. So there's some pros and cons to it, but yeah, I still think that going Transcendence is probably a little bit better, but Soul Eater is still a very good choice. And then finally, Shifter's Shield, and this one's specifically for your gods like Artemis or Danza that can go into that hybrid-based build. As if you don't know, Shifter's Shield is disgusting. It has 5 stats for the price of Gauntlet of Thebes. As you'll see later in the video when we go over other builds, I'll go more in depth on why Shifter's Shield is so fucking good. You know, shit like that. But Shifter's Shield you can build like straight up instead of Gauntlet for Danzabora or Artemis and get the, you know, more value out of it. Because if you don't know, in his passive, while over 75 health, you get 30 physical power. That's disgusting. That's as much power as Fail Not has. So obviously it's just a better Gauntlet. You're going to be doing just the same amount of damage and be fucking tanky. And if you get low, well, you just get 50 procs overall. So that's pretty cool. So Shifter's Shield is here for your more bruiser slash tanky, you know, some of your hunters that can go at like Artemis and Danza, like I said. But other than that, that's basically it. Nothing was really changed too much with them. Still very good. I think they're better in a team comp, in a Joust team comp, than your ability-based hunters. We'll see how long that lasts. But yeah, that is your ability-based hunters build. All right, On to our mages. I'm about to look at my notes a lot here. So there has been a lot of changes to mages. A decent amount of changes to mages. Not like a whole, you know, like giant change to all the mages where it, like, you know, fully changes the entirety of the build, but a decent amount of your start on your build has changed a lot. And this was like 11.6. This has been a little bit, you know, sort of been the meta since 11.6. We're 11.7, so not really much changed for your mages. It turns out most of the changes weren't for mages, more for your warriors, guardians, and assassins. And hunters. Mages didn't really get much, which is fine. They had a lot of changes at 11.6, so one of the biggest things was pre 9.5. They had a lot of, or they reduced the protections and health, as I said many times before, and therefore items that have a lot of flat pen like Doom Orb and Desolation have been coming back in the meta a lot more, and so rushing that gives you way more value even against tanks. With that being said, tanks are still in the meta. So I remember going over Charon's Coin. I think it was like Sands of Time, Desolation, Charon's Coin, Obsidian Shard, Soul Reaver into Ethereal Staff, and that was before the 9.5 changes. So people were still tanky as hell. But because of that, you know, we don't need to worry too much as we did back then about percent pen and health damage related items. So we've kind of toned back on that, but you're still buying your percent pen, you're still buying your health or damage related items. As I'll go on, but that's kind of the preface for that. Going into the starters, I still like Sands of Time over Conduit Gem. I don't think I'm ever gonna like Conduit Gem unless they give it cooldown. Conduit Gem does more damage, but it does mean that you have less cooldown. Sands of Time gives you that 10% cooldown, up to 20% if you want to go to Pendulum of the Ages, and I think that as of right now, with the build with the current meta build, you don't have too many options for cooldown that give you good stats. So obviously, if you go Sands of Time, you can go into other items that don't give you as much cooldown because you have cooldown in it. With Conduit Gem, you do have to build Chronos Pendant. Otherwise, you're gonna have to fish for like 10% cooldown on all items, which means you're not gonna have as great, you know, passives and damage, min-maxing your build as much, in my opinion. So Conduit Gem and Chronos, if you're going to go Conduit, which is still a fine item, you're going to have to go Chronos. It does kind of not do justice to your build that I think Sands of Time does, so I still think you go Sands of Time in my opinion. I think that's all I wanted to say there. For Sands of Time, like I said, it gives you that 10% cooldown because we're back into a Doom Orb rush. Doom Orb has been refined. It gives you 95 power, 25 MP5. They changed it from percent pen to magical pen, so that makes it a lot better. Percent pen to flat pen, sorry. That makes it a lot better. They reduced the price of Doom Orb, I think, by like 300 gold or something similar to that. They buffed it like 2 separate occasions on terms of reducing its gold, so it's not as expensive anymore. And so it's just a lot better to go earlier in the game. And so Doom Orb Rush, I think, is just your go-to, especially with flat pen being in the meta as well. It makes it even more better. But with Sands of Time, you do have 10% cooldown, so you don't have to worry about too much of your cooldown. After this, Spirit Desolation is still very good. It has a very great passive. It gives flat pen, cooldown, and it's very cheap. So going that second item, and with this build right now, you have 20% cooldown. So this does mean that you can build a lot more items and not have to worry too much about cooldown. Roughly around that 20 to 30% of cooldown is probably your sweet spot. Obviously you want more if you can, but you can go into better items that have better passive and stats at the cost of not having cooldown, because you have cooldown in this build right now. Going into your third item, this is generally your go-to when you're mages. After this, you're in your third item. This whole row right here is your potential for third item here, or your third item slot. As I've said before, Staff of Mirrodin is, I think, your go-to if you have if you're playing a god that gets great benefit out of this. So like a god like Ishel, I don't think gets great benefit out of it. I think it's okay. You can kind of build this on any mage really, outside of like a couple that's kind of troll as hell. But you know, some mages get better benefits out of this than other gods, because remember, this does you do get the passive that allows you to do extra damage once your ultimate has finished casting, whereas some gods like Thoth, Kukulkan, and Vulcan, they, you know, as soon as they throw out their ult, they get that extra passive on the ult itself. Whereas other gods like Ishel that don't, you know, finish casting until after the entire ult is finished, meaning that your Staff of Mirrodin passive doesn't actually proc on Ishel's ult initially because it's, you know, you're still casting it. Still, I think still very solid. I will obviously put a chart. I put it in my last video too, the chart of the gods that do have great value out of Staff of Mirrodin and some that don't. But if your god does have like very good ult to proc Staff of Mirrodin, like Vulcan, Thoth, and Kukulkan, I think you almost always build this. It gives 10% cooldown, percent pen, power, and obviously that really crazy passive. So if you do have this, I mean, you're cooking. You have 30% cooldown with this build. You have flat pen, percent pen. Otherwise, if you're a guy that doesn't get as much value out of that, I would say go into Obsidian Shard. Obsidian Shard is just really fucking good. It's always been a good item, probably the past like, year and a half. But you know, it comes in and out of the meta depending on what you're really looking for. An Obsidian Shard min-maxes your percent pen, giving you basically similar to Titan's Bane, basically the exact same thing as Titan's Bane, giving you 40% pen in one ability. And I think you build this third slot right here because, again, like I said, double tank is still very good. Not as, you know, they take a lot more damage because of pre 9.5 changes. But you still want your percent pen, and I think Obsidian Shard is perfect for this slot. If you're going up against your squishier team comps, like let's say you go into a Hunter, Mage, and a Guardian, for example, then I would suggest going into Rod of Tahuti. Again, you can still go into these items, and it's still very good, I think. But I think going into Rod of Tahuti, for example, would be better, just because it gives you way more power. It gives you a little bit percent pen, but then obviously it's passive, giving you even more power. Being able to kill those squishies a lot easier, so I would suggest Rod of Tahuti in this spot if you're going up against squishier targets. And then I want to put this as an honorable mention, but it's also a good third item slot. You can even go Soul Gem in this slot. I would not suggest building Soul Gem if you're going up against a double tank team comp or any type of comp that has a decent amount of protections. Always make sure you check your enemy's builds. But if you're going up against squishies, or you think that your god has really great value at a Soul Gem, and so you can kind of just go Soul Gem because you feel like you just feel like you can, for like gods that spam out abilities like Ishel, for example, Soul Gem is pretty solid. I want to put this as honorable mention because I think it's a luxury item. It's a cheap item that gives you a bunch of stats, but the stats aren't as impactful as like Rod, Obsidian, or Staff of Mirrodin, and that's just because of the percent pen, and obviously Rod giving you a fuck ton of power. But Soul Gem, still a very good item. I mean, it's kind of like the same thing as Mirrodin, just not as good because you know, for obvious reasons, but because it gives you 10% cooldown, health, magical lifesteal, power, and passive that, you know, is really good. They're all really good, just not as impactful as I think these ones are, so you can always go this one as well, but just be careful about it. So you would pick from one of these. Let's just go Obsidian Shard for Ishel, for example. After this, I still think Soul Reaver is very good. After looking at its passive and thinking back to what I said before, pre 9.5 and then the changes beforehand when everyone was tankier with health and protections, I still think Soul Reaver is still very good. Like I said before, most of your squishier targets never really got up to 2250 unless they built an item with health, and so you never really got that extra damage because obviously it says over 2250. You would get up to like 2000, 2100 at squishies if you didn't build any health related items. Now you're at like 17, 1800. And so, you know, you're still doing roughly around the same amount of damage as you did before. And then your tanks are still building a lot of health related items. So you're still getting up to like that close to 3k mark. So you're still getting that max value at 9% maximum health damage at 2750. Most tanks are getting up there pretty easily. And so I still think Soul Reaver, really nothing's changed. And I think Soul Reaver is still in a very good spot to go here. And then last up, Ethereal Staff. I think Ethereal Staff is gross. Specifically in Joust, I think Ethereal Staff, E-Staff. E-Staff has been always a good item, especially against your tanks, specifically in Joust, just because how many times you proc Ethereal Staff, and because, you know, double tank has been in the meta for so long, E-Staff gets a lot of value out of it. If you don't know, E-Staff got a recent buff adding an extra stack on it. So you can only get 3 stacks before it would, you know, run out of the 60-second or the cooldown, or this however long it was to steal it, and then, you know, your the passive of E-Staff would disappear. So now you're getting an extra 8% maximum mana stealing from them, and an extra 6% maximum health stolen from the enemy, which is really good, especially into this meta where health and mana are very important, specifically health, because of the pre 9.5 changes I was talking about earlier. And so E-Staff, I think, has gotten a lot better. And in my opinion, I would rather build E-Staff first and then Soul Reaver, just because of the recent buff E-Staff got. I thought you always built this item anyways. It was always my go-to. It's like, well, what do I want here? We're going up against double tank. I don't know what to build. Let me just build E-Staff, because it's just like very good. It makes you tankier. You steal their stats, which is even better, making their squishier, on top of Soul Reaver and stuff like that. So in my opinion, I still think E-Staff is really, really fucking good right now. And I think you build E-Staff earlier than Soul Reaver, in my opinion. Obviously, you can go Soul Reaver beforehand if you want, and then go to E-Staff, but I'm building E-Staff beforehand from now on, just because of how good it is. And that's basically your go-to meta build here, I think. Make sure that I didn't miss anything. I talked about that. Yep. And then on to your honorable mentions. So, Warlock Staff, honestly, Warlock Staff might not be an honorable mention, just because of how good I think this is. This might be an item that might take over the meta. It's a little bit early into the season, or into the 11.7 patch. But honestly, I think this item might just be better as your start. They've been trying to buff, or they have been buffing Warlock Staff a lot recently, and I think we're starting to get to that point where it's like, well, Warlock Staff just gives too much not to get. And specifically, it gave them an extra 100 health, which may not seem like a lot, but thinking about what it was before, I think they gave it 300 health at the beginning. I think it was like 11, I don't remember. So at some point, I remember saying that Warlock Staff got an extra 300 health or close to it, something like that. Insane. And so you thinking about that plus the extra 200 health, I think Warlock Staff, you kind of just go straight up in the beginning of your build. So if I were to get rid of this build, for example, I'd honestly skip Doom Orb, go straight into a Warlock Staff, Desolation, Obsidian Shard, and then you know, E-Staff, Soul Reaver. And I think this would be a really good item, a really good build. With pre 9.5 changes, health related items are going to be very good. If you don't know, Warlock Staff, when fully stacked, gives you 500 health. It also gives you 10% penetration. I don't remember how much mana it gives you, and I believe it gives you 80 power. Let's actually just go look at it right now. Yeah, so as you can see, 80 power, which is not crazy, but 500 health, 200 mana, and 10% magical penetration. So in my opinion, I think that you know, this item is still like is still, I mean, it's a lot better. It's very good. I think you build this, you know, if you're gonna build this, I think you go at your first item slot here, and, you know, skip Doom Orb, and then this would be sort of like your build here. And I think this is very good. Warlock Staff might be a sleeper item that I think might just might be better. Obviously, Divine Rune for your Spirit Desolation if you need anti-heal, which sucks because at that point you're not getting 10% cooldown, but it's kind of necessary. You can, if you want to get Divine Rune, you may have to, you know, switch your build around if you want to get that 20% cooldown. You know, Doom Orb, Divine Rune. If you have a god that gets Staff of Mirrodin, then Staff of Mirrodin works perfectly here, and then you can just go into like your items here. And obviously, you know, if you wanted, again, Soul Reaver and E-Staff are like my go-to, but if you really want more percent pen, you can skip Soul Reaver, for example, go Obsidian Shard and go Ethereal Staff. You know, these are just items to think about. You can make interchanges, but you know, if you don't proc Staff of Mirrodin, for example, and you need Divine Rune, you can always go into a Soul Gem for that sacrifice, and then you know, into like, you know, Obsidian Shard, E-Staff, just to have some damage here. But unfortunately, Divine Rune is very important. And then obviously Charon's Coin, I think, is honorable mention. I don't think Charon's Coin is as good with, you know, pre 9.5. you know, it's not as valuable. And then on top of that, Joust, the changes to Joust making the game a lot quicker. You're never really, you know, stacking Charon's coin. Not that this was like the main part of what you wanted to build Charon's for. I mean, it gave you 20% magical penetration right out the gate with some, you know, MP5, HP5, and, you know, the passive eventually stacking. But, you know, I just don't feel like it's as good anymore when you can just get Obsidian Shard passive right away. But yeah, this is basically your mage build. Let me make sure I got everything. Yeah, that's basically it. So again, like I said, I think you almost always go these two items, and then you know, pick from here, and then you know Soul Reaver E-Staff, for example. And obviously, like I said, you can interchange items like this, for example. You know, if you didn't want Staff of Mirrodin or whatever, you can go right out to Hootie. All of these items right here, you can mix and match for the most part, as long as you have what you really want, which is cooldown, power, and min-maxing your stats like percent, pen, and health damage related items. You want to make sure you have like at least one of those in your build. But yes, that is your mage. Well, that is your mage build. All right, on to your assassins. And this is mainly for your ability-based assassins. Your auto attack assassins are just not going to be that great, so I don't really want to talk about that build. But you can kind of get the gist for auto attack assassins if you really want to learn about those, and when I go over auto attack warriors. Regardless, here we are. So this is your build. I have a little bit of extra stuff down here. I have 2 other items, Spell Knot and Heartseeker, but then generally this is your go-to items. So I've talked about, if you want to look at my other builds for my assassins, you can go back into my other previous meta update videos, as they go more into explaining like your go-to builds. Like, you know, it used to be like Gauntlet and then straight damage. So if you want to go over into more explanation there, you can for that. But I'm probably just going to go ahead and skip this because, as I said, meta builds are just to go through what the meta builds are fairly quickly with a little bit of explanation. But yeah, let's go ahead and hop right into the assassins. So I'm just looking at my notes here to make sure I didn't forget anything or forgot anything. No. So I'm gonna say it again. Pre 9.5 changes make gods like mages, ability-based hunters, and your assassins a lot better, in my opinion. Being able to burst down enemies is obviously gonna be a lot easier. So gods who can burst down enemies are gonna be easier or better. Sorry. And so I think that your assassins are kind of more building towards that bursty / bruiser type of builds, because there's a lot of bruiser items now that give you power and basically extra damage, so you can be tanky and burst them down pretty good. So you can take shots a lot easier without dying, while also, you know, doing a fuck ton of damage. So let's start with the starters. Here are your basic starters here. You know, Warrior's Axe, Sundering Axe. You're almost always going into this just for like your general, you know, gives you protections, it gives you some power and a really good passive. So you can always just go into Warrior's Axe if you want to. If you wanted to be more tanky, you can go into your Warding Sigil. As you can see, gives you a little bit of power and protections, but its passive makes you even more, you know, tanky. Now, I didn't put the extra starters here, the upgrade starters here, but as you can see, Sigil of the Old Guard right here. That one is more for you being tankier. So if you want to be super tanky, as it does give you some damage mitigation, you can go Sigil the Old Guard, or you can go Infuse Sigil, which I prefer more, especially for your assassins, which gives you basically an exploding perimeter around you at 4 stacks when, you know, you take damage. So, you know, with assassins being really close, up and personal, like a Circuit, I think Infuse Sigil is just your go-to for the most part. Other than that, you go Bluestone sometimes on other gods. Not a lot of gods really, assassins really get value out of Bluestone, but just here, just in case, for a couple gods, like Nashal is really good with Bluestone, for example. But Sundering Axe, Warding Sigil are going to be your Warrior's Axe, Sundering Axe, Warding Sigil are going to be your pretty much your 2 options here. But going into the build, nothing too much has changed in terms of like the outline of your build and what you're trying to do. Just some items that have been changing, that just changed. So if you don't know, Gauntlet was like, really, you build Gauntlet and go straight damage just to be able to tank a little bit and do damage. Well, Gauntlet not really an item that much anymore, with Shifter's Shield being gross. You're always going Shifter's Shield. Now, whether or not you want to go at first, it's on you. The power spike from Jotun's Wrath and Runeforge is still very good. Now, because, you know, if Shifters wasn't here, I would still say go Jotun's Runeforge or Jotun's Blackthorn, depending on the god you're playing. But because Shifter's Shield just gives you so much, and it's just a better gauntlet, I just don't know why you wouldn't go Shifter's Shield first item. And so I think going Shifter's Shield on every assassin is your go-to. It gives you 30 protections of each, 300 health, 20 HP 5, and a passive over 75 health. You get 30 power, 75 below 75%. You get 20 protections. So I mean, it's just a win-win for you. I think this is the only item that technically gives you 5 stats for how cheap it is. So until this item gets nerfed, which it will, trust me, this item will get nerfed. So if you're watching this a little bit ahead, pay attention to what Shifter's Shield is currently. But as of right now, Shifter's Shield is just the best item in the game, hands down. So until it's nerfed, always go Shifter's Shield. After that, I would suggest going into Jotun's Wrath. Jotun's Wrath gives you that cooldown, physical pen, mana, and some power. And obviously you can go into either Jotun's Cunning or Jotun's Vigor, depending on which god you want. It really depends on what you want. You want more cooldown, you go Cunning. If you want more, healing and lifesteal, sorry, you'd go into Vigor. But I like Jotun's Wrath here. Gives you a little bit of cooldown in this build and all the extra stats that you like. If you do proc, if you have really good CC in your builds, like Serket, like Thor, like Lancelot, for example, you would always go Runeforge and then upgrade your glyph, depending on what you want. This gives you MP5, so you never run out of MP5. On top of the mana that Jotun's Wrath gives you, it's a very good combo. Otherwise, if you don't proc Runeforge Hammer, like if you're playing Camazotz, for example, I would opt into a Blackthorn, as I still think Blackthorn is a very good item. Gives you health, physical power, mana, and a passive that gives you infinite mana or cooldown, and I think that's very good here. So it would you opt into either one of these, depending on which assassin you are. But for Serket's sake, we're gonna go into Runeforge because I think Runeforge you always go. So this is your build up to this point. Nothing really outside of this. I think you're just always building this. Like I said, you can rearrange this build, like if you really wanted to. I don't know why, in my opinion, but you could go like this: Runeforge and then Shifters. Sorry, Runeforge and then Shifters. Can you click it? Thank you. Shifters if you wanted to. I just think Shifters gives you so much. I don't know why you wouldn't just build Shifters first, but you can rearrange it if you want to. Now from here on out, you can either go into your more bruiser type of build, which I prefer, or you can go into your straight damage, like Titan's Bane, Heartseeker if you really wanted to. That's why they're there. But for me, in my opinion, I think you go into that bruiser type of build after this. And that's why we have Mantle of Discord or Spirit Robe. I like going into Mantle of Discord just because they just keep reducing the price and buffing this fucking item. And specifically with a lot of CC, these are both very good items. As Mantle of Discord, if you get CC'd, you do Unleash a Shock that stuns all enemies, and you become immune for 1 second, which is basically just you have an extra beads if you get CC'd, which is very nice. Because if you're going up against a team, as Joust has a lot of CC heavy teams, like if you're going up against a Cab, Bacchus, and some Hunter, Mantle of Discord might just be the play because you get CC immunity. On top of that, you get 45 protections and 10% cooldown, which is very good because you have 30% at this point, 40 if you went Blackthorn. And then if you wanted to, you can obviously go Spirit Robe too. This one also, if you get CC'd, you get mitigation. So if you wanted to be tankier rather than having the CC immunity, you can go Spirit Robe instead. God like Thor would be very good on this too. Serket, I would almost always go Mantle just because you're up in front of them. You want to make sure you don't get locked down. You want to have your mobility on lock. So I would say Mantle of Discord, you're probably go to for a guy like Serket, but Spirit Robe's still very good. And then last but not least, we have Archdruid's Fury. Archdruid's Fury actually at one point in the meta was your first go-to. I thought that was good. It does give you MP5 early game too. But I still like Archdruid's towards that late game, as you still get, as the game goes on, it says your next basic attack on an enemy god consumes all stacks and deals 30 plus 2 per level magical damage per stack. So when you're level 20, for example, you're getting 40 extra damage plus the 30, which I think scales better in the game. Obviously, it's still very good. You know, as your first item, and you can still build out your first item. But I do like the Archdruid's Fury, as it's basically a bruiser item. Gives you extra protections, gives you some health. You never run out of MP5 now, for sure. And then, obviously, if you take damage, you have a passive, you know, weave in autos, which a lot of assassins do. So, you know, you're proccing Archdruid's Fury while under Rune Force, for example, while giving power from Shifters and, you know, Mantle of Discord. I mean, you're just kind of just doing whatever the fuck you want. And at this point, you have like 200 of each protection, and that's not accounting for any, you know, passives or any, you know, other items that your teammates may be building that can help you. And with this, you have 140 power, not accounting for everything else that this is giving you. So I think this is like a very solid go-to build for any of your good assassins in Joust. Obviously, you have other items down here, your honorable mentions. In Chile, we don't talk about enough. I think this item is very good. I think you build this item all the time if you're going up against, you know, a double mage team comp, or I'm sorry, a double magical team comp. Sorry, I would build in Chile instead of, you know, Archdruids and build it earlier. For example, instead of Mantle of Discord, I'd probably build this, you know, up at the latest like 5. You can obviously, instead of going your Jotun's Wrath, Rune Forge, you can go Chile right away, and then, you know, go Jotun's Wrath, Rune Forge, and then, you know, Mantle, for example. You can mix and match these items, obviously make it work for your sake. But Chile obviously gives you 45 protections, 200 health, HP 5, but it's passive, giving you an extra 20 physical power. This is like your standard bruiser item. So if you're going up against magical gods, Chile is just going to be your go-to, giving you even more power every time you get damaged by one. And then Relic Dagger, I think, is specifically good on gods that want to have your relics on infinite cooldown. So gods like Hunbats, for example, I think Relic Dagger is really good. Blink ulting is just so good. Serket, with all of her mobility, blink ulting, blink 2ing, setting up for your team, and then also just like being able to jump out. You want to have your relics on cooldown all the time. You know, beads is very important for assassins as well. So I think Relic Dagger is another honorable mention. And then obviously you have your damage items here. This is just if you wanted to build more damage oriented. Titan's Bane, Brawler's Beatstick, and Heartseeker. Titan's Bane for obviously for the reasons for damage, percent pen. Brawler's Beatstick for some pen and anti-heal. Heartseeker for health damage related for tanks. And then last but not least, Fail Not is just like a fun item here, just because Fail Not you can now build outside of hunters. You can build this on assassins now, and I think that this is a fun build on certain gods like Serket and Neja that can, you know, weave in autos. You have 20% cooldown. I think it's more of a fun item. I don't think it's like technically an honorable mention. Just someone to put it here because I think it's you can now build it, so it's actually, you know, pretty fun if you want to build that. Let me make sure that I didn't miss anything. So you got Shifters, yeah, everything, Archdruids, and that's pretty much it. Again, with most of these builds, you can mix and match with these, especially with Chile. If you're going to build Chile, you do want to make sure you mix and match some of these items. I don't think you should really get rid of Shifters. I think it's just too good. So finding a place to put Chile earlier on in the build is going to give you a lot of value, because I don't actually think Chile is an honorable mention. I think it's probably just an item that you would just build in general if you're going up against a double magical, just because of how insane the item is. So I probably would just get rid of it for Archdruid's Fury and just go earlier in the build and delay some of the other items. But that is your assassin build. All right, on to Guardians. So with Guardians, not much has changed again, specifically with tanks like Guardians, as there's a lot of variation of items that you buy, and it really just depends on the enemy team comp as well as your team comp, and you buy accordingly to, you know, what you have there. There's only like a few changes, some few staple changes that I primarily want to focus up on, and some of them being pretty obvious. So starting off with your starters, Sundering Axe, I mean, still your go-to if you just want extra protections, damage, good passive. Sigil if you want to be tankier. You know, you go into I don't remember what the, I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember what they're called right off the bat. Starters. Sigil, where's Sigil? Am I dumb? I might be dumb. Wait, I don't see Sigil. Hold on. Jesus. Okay, Sigil of the Old Guard if you want to have more mitigations to be tankier, and Infused Sigil if you want to have more damage. Sigil of the Old Guard is probably better for you to be tankier. As a tank, you want to be able to tank towers. Damage mitigations would be good for you, but you know, if you want to do more damage, you can with Infused Sigil. Other than that, you do have Sands of Time into Alternate Timeline, giving you a little less tankier stats in exchange for cooldown, some NP5, and a little bit more damage. And then until late game, you get what you really were looking for with Sands of Time, which is Alternate Timeline, giving you some protections and an alternate life. This benefits more of your Guardians, as 40%, I believe, health back is going to benefit more tanks who build more health related items than it would a squishier mage that builds not any health related items. So alternate timeline is very good, and I usually build this majority of the time, even though it's riskier late game. You do want to make sure that if you do build this item, you want to play it safer a little bit earlier in the game, as you're not very tanky. Onto the build, I'm going to be looking at my notes here because there are a lot of things here. I want to make sure I don't skip over when describing some of these items. So first off, with Shifter Shield, I mean, this is probably your most obvious one. You're still going into, you know, your gauntlets and your prophetic, but with Shifter Shield being just a better version of that, Shifter Shield is going to be your go-to. Think of this as your, basically as your Gauntlet of Thebes. As, again, protections, health, even more damage. With its passive, it's just better overall than Gauntlet of Thebes. Let's see. One item that I have been liking a lot more is Contagion. Contagion, even if you don't have anti-heal, I mean, it's good for your physical protections if you're going up against another team with physical, like 2 physical gods and like 1 magical. Contagion is very good, and especially if they have CC, which most team comps have a decent amount of CC. With the changes to pre 9.5, the extra damage, flat number of damage, 25 damage per second, is going to be doing more, obviously, if you have less protections and less health, especially against your squishies. This does a lot of damage over time, especially if there's a lot of CC. So the damage from Contagion is pretty underrated, and there is a sneaky little thing you can do with Contagion with Sundering Axe. This actually can proc Sundering Axe. So if they CC you, it does proc Sundering Axe, so you can get a lot of poke damage without even hitting them. And I've been liking Contagion a lot. It's very cheap. Health, HP 5, passive is very good, and you know, it has anti-heal. So if anyone is healing, it's a very good item to pick up. Other than that, let's go on to magical. We'll go over Glad Shield here in a second. One item I have been liking a lot, and this kind of goes in and out of the meta, but Oni's Guard, I think Oni Hunter's Garb is really good right now. It gives you MP5 that you need. It gives you mitigations in its passive. It stacks up 3 times. And in Joust, you're always near 3 enemies, especially as you're the tank, as you're supposed to be close to the enemy. You're supposed to be in the front line, so you're supposed to be very close to them at majority of the times. So the passive that Oni Hunter's Garb is going to be giving you is going to be pretty valuable. Obviously, you have Shoguns and what is that item called? I can't think of the item. I don't have it here because it's not. I don't want to put it here because Shoguns is basically the idea of what this item can do. It's a little bit different as it gives you movement speed, Talisman of Energy. You have Shoguns and Talisman of Energy for this item slot if you'd like, for your ADCs if you'd want. Amulet of the Silence I've been liking on gods like Atlas. What is the actual item called? I always forget these items. Heartward Amulet. Heartward Amulet is very good right now too. Again, it gives you MP5, so it does help with your MP5 needs. And then obviously Amulet of Silence is very good as well. It silences, and I think it's an underrated item. It's been an underrated item for a while. It's not like the craziest thing. It's pretty niche, but it's still, I think, underrated and giving your allies magical protections. If you're going up against 2 magical enemy team comp with 2 magical gods, I think Heartward Amulet is very good here too. So that's an option. But generally speaking, I think Oni Hunter's Garb is probably your go-to. Now going into more of your physical items here, you still have Glad Shield. for gods who are like more bruiser like. So like if you're playing RDO, for example, or even Atlas that proc items or proc abilities a lot, Cthulhu, Jormungandr, those type of gods, I think Glad Shield is very good instead of Contagion as well, because it gives you cooldown stuff. Now specifically with Shield of the Phoenix, this is going to be talking about with when we talk about warriors, but Shield of Phoenix is really good too, even on some of your guardians. Now, not always on every single guardian. I don't think it's like the greatest on Atlas. It's okay on Atlas, but on like RDO, which is like the guardian version of magical version of King Arthur, I think you almost always go Shield of Phoenix. This item's really good on her. If you don't know, you hit enemy god, and it's basically old Glad Shield, giving you 2% of your maximum health and mana back, 30 physical protections, 250 health, 20 HP 5, and 10% cooldown. That item is busted for 2350 gold. That's disgusting. Other gods like Cthulhu can get really good value out of this. Jormungandr, obviously, these are more for your bruiser type of guardians, so you can go that there. But generally speaking, I just like going into either Contagion or Glad Shield. Breastplate of Valor is still pretty good as well if you just feel like doing that as well. I mean, Breastplate's very good too. It's not here, but Breastplate's very good as well. But let's just go in here. And that's basically what you kind of want to think about for your physical and magical items. Again, you know, it depends on the team comp. If you're going up against 2 physical gods, you want to prioritize these items. If you're going up against 2 magical, you want to prioritize these items, and then move on to these items down here. So we talked about that. Oh, one thing I did want to talk about is Archdruid's Fury, which is not here. Jesus, I should have put that there. My bad. Archdruid's Fury, I think, is a very good item right now. And I think this item, if you're looking for like a lot of MP5, looking for MP5, and you know, you don't want, because Onis gives you MP5, Shoguns gives you MP5, and Amulet gives MP5. Not a lot of physical defense items that gives you MP5. I don't think there's any actually, besides Breastplate of Valor. If you don't want to go Breastplate of Valor, you still have an option to go Archdruid's Fury, and I like this a lot better. Specifically, you know, gods that have good autos, like for example Atlas. Archdruid's Fury is very good in this slot. Gives you MP5, gives you protections, health, and then obviously your passive for auto. So if you want to get some MP5 earlier on, still go Shifters, then you can go Archdruids, and this will allow you to go into more cooldown items, and that's kind of what you really want. Like this build right here is very good, and I think it's a good go-to build in my opinion. But Archdruids there is for your early MP5 I wanted to highlight. It's a good thing I have my notes. I almost forgot that. And then Pridwin here is just, I mean, it's just omnipresent in terms of always being a solid item for the past like 2 years now with its glyphs and everything. So, you know, obviously this gives you 20% cooldown, a passive that it gives you shield and a little bit of protections. So Pridwin's always there just to, you know, give you all the cooldown that you need if you want that as well. So let's just make a mock build right here. And then that's your build right now so far. And that's pretty much a lot of the items here. Then you have Relic Dagger, Spirit Robe, and Mantle, and this kind of rounds out the ending of your build. Relic Dagger is obviously still very good on almost all your guardians. Guardians having like specific relics that you want to have up, like Shell, Blink for initiation, Heavenly Wings to save your teammates, Sunder to do more damage to enemies, Tanks, for example, to help your teammates do more damage. So Relic Dagger, I think, is always a good item to go into. It gives you cooldown, health, you know, everything you want, movement speed. And I still think a Relic Dagger is just always a good item in your build. And I almost think it's necessary, but there's so many items that are still good right now that you can skip it if you'd like, but 1850 gold for that's just too cheap. And then you have Spirit Robe, and then you have Mantle, if you want to. If you can't think of any items that you're like, I don't know what I would want to go here, Spirit Robe and Mantle to the rescue, as they give you cooldown, a good passive. They're relatively cheap, and they give you good protection, so you can always go those items as well. These 3 items are always like, you can never go wrong with these 3 items. And then finally, E-Staff. I think E-Staff, just for your damage, just because of its buff, I think E-Staff is very good, especially going up against tanks. Finally, here are your honorable mentions. Stone of Binding, usually like your last type of item here. Like if you have a really good CC like a Bracken, Stone of Binding is very good towards the end of your build. Void Shield and Void Demaro, if you want to, you know, they're always just really solid items to go into. They're situational depending on what you want to do with them, but I mean, I never am upset at someone building Void Shield or Demaro. Hide of the Nemean Lion, finally. this is back, and this is to counter more of your auto attack based gods. I would only really build this if you're really having a hard time with your hunters or ADCs, and that's basically it for your. That's basically why you would build Nemean Lion. Not the greatest item, but just there for that. And because there's a lot of items here, you can screenshot this, of course, at any moment. But because there are a lot of items here, I do want to make like a overall, because this is just like a bunch of shit here that you just a bunch of items here. That might not help some people here. So I might just go for the general process of what you want to think about when you're playing a Guardian. In terms of your build, just a general path. Obviously, it's not a one-all be-all type of thing here. But again, basically everything about your Guardian stays the same, where you pick and choose any of these items based on your enemy team comp and your team comp, like I said before. But basically, you buy your starter, whichever starter you want. This is the process, of course. And then you buy your shifter shield. This is like your pseudo Gauntlet of Thebes. You always, this is your first two items, always, until shifter shield gets nerfed. This is your go-to every time. From here, you either want to get magical or physical defense items. So if you're going up against double physical, you want to either get Contagion, Glad Shield, or not really Shield of the Phoenix, but you know, Contagion or Glad Shield or Breastplate of Valor. Some of those items there, for example. Or if you're going up against double magical, you want to either get Oni Hunter's Garb, Shoguns, or Heartward Amulet. And then from there, make sure you pay attention to the MP5 items, because if you do have, if you do want MP5, and let's say you're going up against double physical team comp, you want MP5, you can either go Breastplate of Valor, but if you don't want Breastplate of Valor, you can always go Archdruid's Fury, and then go into your physical defense. So you could go something like this, or you could go into like a Pridwin if you want cooldown, and this kind of, you know, this gives you enough protections for both. Like right now you have, let's get rid of Sundering. Right now you have a decent amount of protections for physical and magical, and it kind of allows you to get away with that if you would like. Obviously you can still go into, you know, if you really wanted to, you don't get your cooldown right away, but you can always go shifters, Archdruids, and then Contagion, or, you know, Glad Shield, for example, then Pridwin. I didn't pick Archdruids, sorry. Let's just say Glad Shield and then Pridwin, and you could do that. And that's a pretty solid build as well. So basically, that's what you would want to do for that. So let's just say that we're going up against double physical. You would go into Archdruids and Contagion. And then from there, you either want to build some of your go-to items that are always very good. And that either being your Pridwin, your Relic Dagger, your Spirit Robe, or your Mantle of Discord. And this would be like your pretty much your go-to build at this point. You can always, if you want to get MP5 a little bit later as well, you don't care about MP5 as much. Let's say you're a god that doesn't use MP5 that much. You can just skip that, go Contagion, and then go into Archdruids, and then maybe like Pridwin or Relic Dagger or Spirit Robe or Mantle of Discord, something like that. Generally speaking, if you're going to go build like this, you want to make sure you want to min-max your cooldown, so you would go like that, for example. Like I said, again, Pridwin, Relic Dagger, Spirit Robe, Mantle are always like your go-to. And then after that, you can round out your build with some utility. For example, you can go Stone of Binding. You can go... that's kind of basically it. You can go Stone of Binding, or you could go into Spirit Robe, or finish out with a Mantle. Or last up, if you want to do damage, you can go Ethereal Staff, for example. And then, I mean, that's kind of basically the idea. You just want to look at your what you're going up against, what'll give you like really good, what builds really good into those team comps. So let's make a mock build for magical. You can go into shifters. If they have 2 magical and 1 physical, let's say they have like a guardian mage and a warrior. If you want to be tankier, you could go into Oni Hunter's Garb. And then from there you could go into this is annoying me, it's showing me everything. You can go into a Relic Dagger. Relic Dagger is very good. Then you can go into like a Pridwin, and then last up you can go into Stone of Binding. With this build, for example, you get a decent amount of power, for a Guardian. With Shifters, Onis, you get mitigations. Relic Dagger, you have 10% cooldown with its, having infinite, all your relics basically up. Pretty one to cap out your cooldown with its passive as well, giving you even more tanky. And then Stone of Binding, for example, to do more damage, as it basically gives a flat pen whenever you hit them with a crowd control ability, or if you wanted to go E-stat to do more damage, because that item's very good right now. Either way, that's kind of like the general process. Each game will be different. Certain items you might want to put in there instead of others, as for example, you might want Nemean or Void Shield or Void of Mario. But that's basically like the general gist if you're struggling with what to build. Again, Pridwin, Relic Dagger, Spirit Rope, and Mantle, I can't stress enough, are always items that you can just build all the time, and it's always good for the most part. Maybe outside of Pridwin. Some gods don't get good out of Pridwin, but Relic Dagger, Spirit Robe, Mantle, and a majority of the time Pridwin are just really good go-tos. I'm done yapping about Guardians. That's basically your build for Guardians. Oops, I forgot to change this to AA Warrior. Let me do it real quick. But on to AA Warriors. Nothing much changed here either, except of a couple items. Obviously being one of them. If you've been watching some of the other builds that I've been doing this throughout this video, you'll know one item that's specific, being this item right here. AA Warriors, I think, are a little bit better. Very similar to AA Hunters. They're a little bit better just because of some of the items that they've been given. But, overall, nothing's too much changed here. You still have your Acts of Animosity, obviously, for its passive, giving you extra damage for maximum health. Shifter Shield, obviously, just going to be your go-to item. Basically, you're going to Thebes, damage, all of that. Always go Shifter Shield. This build should always just look like this. For a god like Erlong Shen, you have, let me back up. There are 3 items after this, I think, that are very good after Shifter Shield. You have Runeforge Hammer, you have Stone Cutting Sword, and you have Equinox. Going over Runeforge is very good on gods that can proc it well. So Erlong with his 2 and his 3 now, because these 3 can knock up, which is nice, and his ult that can proc Runeforge Hammer. So he has 3 abilities that can consistently proc Runeforge Hammer. I'd almost always build this on Erlong Shen. A god like Gilgamesh is very good with this too. So I would build Runeforge here for that. Equinox would be an item for other gods, maybe like Vamana or Bellona, I think, have better proccing for Equinox. And then obviously this gives healing, more damage, movement speed, attack speed, and more physical power. Stone Cutting Sword, I think, is a very good item as well. This is an item that you can always go in your second slot because this is basically a hybrid item. If you don't know, this gives power, movement speed, and a passive that gives you up to 21 of each protection when you use your autos. So this can also be good on your Vamanas, your Bellona, your Amaterasu, even on Erlong. If you don't feel like you want to do Runeforge, you can go Stone Cutting. I think this is where you would put this slot in here. So for Erlong, for example, let's go Runeforge. At this point, it depends on the enemy, the team comp that you think, and what you build here. You can obviously just go Berserker Shoguns if you wanted to. Like, if you really want to do that, you could do that. I don't think it min-maxes what you are wanting in a AA Warrior, but you can do that. If you're going up against double physical team comp, obviously go Berserkers. Double magical, go Shoguns. I would either build one of these just to have that there. And then the next item are based on, this really hasn't changed. Pridwin, Spirit Robe, and Mantle. Pridwin, if you proc it really well, like Gilgamesh, for example, and even Erlong, you can go Pridwin here. If not, Spirit Robe and Mantle are going to be, Mantle are going to be good for you. So you either go Pridwin, Spirit Robe, or Mantle. For Erlong, for example, you can honestly go any of these. But I'm going to go Pridwin, for example. This would be your build so far. And then last but not least, Kins for the extra damage, very similar to Acts of Animosity. And with this build, you absolutely fuck. Again, nothing's really changed here. Couple items in your honorable mentions. You have Hasten Fatalis. This is basically just an honorable mention because, again, this doesn't give stats, any really good stats, but it is good to chase down. And at the same time, I don't think you really need Hasten Fatalis for your AA Warriors. You can if you want, but I think you get enough I think you have enough in this build to give you movement speed and to catch people down. I don't think you need haste and fatalis, but it's still a pretty solid item. I think this would be really good on Vamana a lot of the time. So you could go haste and fatalis in your second item here for Vamana, for example, if you'd like. Arc Druids, pretty synergistic with how they are. I mean, you take damage every time you auto, you get extra damage. It does give you MP5, so you can go Arc Druids as your second item slot or even late in the game as well. And then finally, Phalanx to exchange Berserker Shield. If you're going up against, you know, gods that have a lot of a lot of autos. So if you're going up against a team comp with like a Hunter, an AA Warrior, and like a Guardian, then Phalanx would be perfect for this slot, as every time you get basic attacked, you get, it gives you attack speed and protections. So you go Phalanx there instead. This is your AA Warrior build. Nothing's really changed here, so moving on. All right, finally we have ability-based warriors, and I feel like their builds have gotten a lot easier, and that's just because of the items that have been given to them that make it that way. But very similar to Guardians, they do have a multitude, they have an array of items that they just choose from, and they choose from based on the enemy team comp as well as your own. Not as much as it would be for Guardians in terms of your own team comp, but against the enemy team comp, it'll obviously depend, you know, if they have 2 physical, 2 magical, you know, shit like that. Obvious shit like that. There is a lot here, so I want to make sure I'm looking at my notes again. But starting off with your starters, you have your Sundering Axe, Sigil, and Bluestone, very similar to your assassins. Sundering Axe, very good all around, just to go in, power, defense, passive. Sigil, if you want to be tankier. And then Bluestone, for those gods that, not a lot of gods have it, but for example, like King Arthur and Wukong, who get a little bit more value out of Bluestone because they do a little bit more damage, or have a lot more abilities like King Arthur. Bluestone, once in a while, you'll build on. Other than that, getting into the items, Shifter's Shield, again, just your go-to, basically your Gauntlet of Thebes. Again, think of it like that, just too good of an item until they nerf it. Going on to Runeforge Hammer. Now this item specifically is for gods that can proc it a lot, that being Shiva, Horus, and Wukong. I've talked about this before. This is your good go-to item. Your second item gives you MP5. Its passive is obviously very good. And I feel like this item right here fits very, very well. Otherwise, if you're playing a warrior that uses a lot of mana, unlike Cuchulainn, Arc Druid's Fury in your second slot, very similar to what I said about Guardians, giving you that extra protections, as well as the MP5. It gives you just enough to where it, you know, takes you over the edge. Very similar to Runeforge, 5 less MP5. You can go on Arc Druid's Fury and then go into your build, for example, like that, or you know, whatever you want to do afterwards. But for Cuchulainn, he doesn't need it, so we can actually skip Runeforge Hammer and Arc Druids. Yeah, those are for your MP5. We have Glad Shield, a very good item, obviously, for its physical protection, cooldown, health, and HP5, and specifically pairs really well with Shield of the Phoenix on gods that have a lot of abilities, like King Arthur, Cuchulainn, and even guys that don't have a lot of it. So, like for example, Shiva is very good with Glad Shield and Shield of the Phoenix. These items are very good in tandem, and I think these are probably your go-to items for your physical defense. And it's really disgusting, especially if you're going up against two physical gods on the enemy team. I mean, you have 202 health. I'm sorry, 202 protections. You have physical power from shifter shields and the protections that make Glad Shield do even more damage than the passive, and you're healing a bunch, and you have 20% cooldown. So if you're going up against an enemy team with 2 physical gods, I think your build for this, specifically for Cuchulainn, is just going to look something like this. If you're going into if you're using mana, for example, unlike Cuchulainn, you either go Runeforge or Arc Druid's Fury, then you go into this, and then this is you're just golden. You just do so much with this build if you're going up against 2 physical gods. Let me check to see if I miss anything. I think that's basically it. You have Contagion as well, for any type of a lot of CC, for example, if you need that. and obviously anti-heal if you want that as well. Again, I do want to make sure that it is known that in circumstances where there's certain warriors that don't really proc these items all that great, for example, like a Guan Yu or like a Horus, getting these items aren't bad. They're still very good. I think you get more value out of other items though, for example. So for like a Horus, for example, I would get rid of Shield of Phoenix and probably just go Archdruid's Fury within after that, or you know, Spirit Robe or Mantle, because you're gonna have Rune Forge, for example. So like if you're going Horus, you go like Rune Forge, Glad Shield, Spirit Robe, or something like that. And I think this build's a lot better than going into Shield of Phoenix, because I think you get more value out of these. So these items right here. So I think Shield of Phoenix is dependent on certain ability based warriors, and like, you know, Guan Yu, for example, instead of getting Shield of Phoenix, you get you know, Breastplate of Regrowth. That would be a lot better. But you have those for your, these are basically your go-to physical defense items. And then on to I did want to make sure to point out there's certain assassins I didn't go over that get really good value out of Glad Shield and Shield of Phoenix, for example, like Thor and Ravana. So I'll keep in mind they're basically warriors themselves, so you can kind of build this within on them as well. But other than that, that's basically your physical. For magical, I've been liking Anchile for obvious reasons, because it is basically a bruiser item, very similar to Shifters. If you're going up against two magical gods in a team comp, then Anchile can help you do even more damage. So you can, I mean, for Kukulkan, you don't need Runeforge or Archdruid unless you want it. So you can go straight into an Anchile right after Shifters, and then, or if you wanted to go Glad Anchile, or you know, Anchile Glad. Or you could even go Shield of Phoenix. There's a lot of variations you can do with this, and it really just depends on the enemy team comp. So, you know, Anchile is really good here. I've been liking Oni Hunter's Garb a lot too. If you go this second item, this actually, you know, helps you. And building magical defense is a little bit easier for physical in terms of MP5, because there aren't any really good MP5 items outside of Breastplate of Valor that give you good MP5. But every single magical item, magical defense item, gives you MP5, so you don't have to worry too much about that. So Oni Hunter's Garb I've been liking a lot. You build that second. If you're a god that uses mana, you won't have to worry about that for MP5. And so these are basically your two go-to magical defense items in my opinion right now, outside of like Pestilence or Talisman of Energy if you have if you want more movement speed and you have like a hunter on your team, for example, then you can build that. And then of course you still can build into Glad Shield and Shield of Phoenix, because I think these items right here, these combination items, are so good with what they give, especially their passive and in tandem with Shifter Shield, that you don't even really need to be going up against physical gods to get a fuck ton of value out of these. These kind of just supersede all that, and I think they're gonna get nerfed, but I think as of right now these items are just so good that they're just, you don't even need to go up against physical gods to make this have a lot of value because of its passive and overall stats. And then finally, we talked about physical, magical, and now we're on to your trio of items that are always very good. You have your Spirit Robe, Mantle, and Mantle and Pridwin. Actually, let's go ahead and make a mock build. Let's say we're doing physical. At this point, you can go into Spirit Robe, Mantle builds here. Spirit Robe, Mantle, or Pridwin. It depends on which gods you want to. Some warriors don't have, like, for example, Horus is terrible with Pridwin, so instead I would always almost go Spirit Robe or Mantle of Discord. But Pridwin is very good on Kukulkan, so this would be a very good build right now for him. I go Pridwin, always go to items right here. No need to really explain. Pridwin good on some gods, on others it's not. Spirit Robe and Mantle always good. And then finally you have your Void Damaru, Void Shield if you want to, you know, get rid of physical protections and magical protections by 10%. And then you have, like, last item, you can go into Stone of Binding for your more utility. Kukulkan's very good with Stone of Binding. And again, you can always go back and build Archdruid's Fury if you haven't built it. But you can go Stone of Binding. With this build, I have max cooldown, so really I can just go either Titan's Bane or Heartseeker. I almost forgot to also add Beatstick. Beatstick is another item just for anti-heal. If you want that, you can have anti-heal as well. Jotuns is primarily for just your cooldown stat, and if you're going up against squishies, for example, or if you're trying to kill the squishy, Jotun's Wrath will give you extra 10% penetration, which is nice as well. But because we have 40% cooldown right here, I mean, it's probably just better to either go Beat Stick, Titan's Bane, or Heartseeker if you want. But primarily, I'd probably go Stone of Binding, because one of the biggest things with warriors specifically is the amount of damage you do without even building any damage items. You only have a little bit of power, but keep in mind, you're healing all the time with Phoenix Shield, so you're just standing all the time. Glad Shield, with all the protections, you have to do more damage. Shifter Shield, you're doing a lot of damage with its passive. And then Pridwin proc damage, and then, you know, Stone of Binding giving you even more flat pen if you hit them with CC, and Warrior's Axe. So you can go into more damage-oriented items like Beat Stick, Titan's Bane, or Heartseeker, or even Jotuns if you want to cap out your cooldown. But I mean, you're basically building full tank now, and you're still doing so much damage. And then to keep in mind that if you build Anchile, for example, let's say you're going up against a magical team comp, this would probably be my go-to build for a lot of warriors. Would be, you know, Arc Druids, Anchile, Pridwin, and then you can, let's see, how much cooldown you have? You have 20%. In this instance, you can go Jotun's Wrath if you want to, but you can go Stone of Binding, and the amount of damage you're doing with Shifters, Arc Druids, and Anchile, with the amount of power you have, that's not being calculated here, and Stone of Binding and Warrior's Axe, you're just doing so much damage. You don't even need damage-related items, but you can if you want. For example, in this build, if you wanted to, you could get rid of Stone of Binding and go Jotun's Wrath. And this would be a build for guys that aren't Kukulkan, because really you can get rid of Arc Druids here. And then you can go Anchile, Mantle, Pridwin, Stone of Binding. And that would be like a pretty solid build. Or if you don't want Mantle, you could go Glad Shield or Phoenix Shield. And then, you know, last item, Pridwin. All this to say, me choosing all these builds, giving you examples, is that there's so many combinations of items, but going through the general process of looking at physical, like I said, Guardians, physical, magical items to figure out what you want against the enemy team comp, and then incorporating the fact that Spirit Robe, Mantle, and Pridwin are always good go-to items. I mean, you should be good to go, just figuring out those combinations. There's no perfect right build. It all depends on the team comps and what you want to prioritize more of. But combination of all these items, and you'll be cooking. So that is your Warriors build, and that is actually everything for your meta builds. This one is a little bit longer because I wanted to go more into the process of how to build for specifically your Guardians and Warriors. I don't think I've gone too much in depth there, and I think I wanted to do that a little bit more this time. Let me know if you'd rather me not. I know some of you are returning, you're like, oh, he's just yapping. I just want to see the builds. In that case, I showcase the builds for you. You can just screenshot it and move on. But I know there are a lot of people, new people, who come to my vids and want to figure out not just what the builds are, but how to learn, like, or not what is good, but like why it's good. So I always like going over that anyways. But let me know in the comment section down below. Again, I make these just in when there's a meta update, and I do these I do these in one go. Like, I pause it, but I go right afterwards. And talking for an hour and a half is it can drain you. So sorry if I slip up on words or whatever. But again, I do these videos every time there are new meta updates. So expect a new one, probably either in 11.8 or 11.9, whenever there's huge changes of builds. So expect that in the future. If you have any suggestions, feedback, or if you think I missed anything, let me know in the comment section down below. Obviously, if you have questions, please contact me, or please let me know in the comment section down below as well. But you can also join the Discord to contact me about questions. The Discord link is in the description down below as well. Memberships are open. If you like my videos, you want to support me, one of the best ways is through memberships, $2.99 a month. But obviously, you don't need to. Just simply watching the video is good enough for me. And yeah, one last thing, we do have our tournament 3v3 draft joust July 26th 2024, starting at 6 p.m. EST, 5 p.m. CST. So please show up to that, show your support, and yeah, that's pretty much everything that I have for you. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching.